Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
You know, babe, as we kind of prepare for the show, and I thought about this COVID-19 thing and how many people are kind of re-examining their lives and situations that have happened to make them kind of think. And that's what led me to this topic. I know we had a conversation a couple times about this, about living an unexamined life.
Yeah, it's like having a collision with reality.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. Coming up next.
Stay tuned.
You know, we recently spoke to a couple that was going through some serious challenges. And while we love that God is using us to actually talk to people, it really sometimes sits in the back of my mind about why people are going through some of the things that they are going through.
And why do we struggle? There's so many things that we're struggling with that I think that we think are unique to just us.
Right.
But like we always like to say, we are unique, our situation is not. But there are always some common denominators that we're beginning to notice, and I think that's what this is really all about, is empowering us to not keep having the same situations over and over and over again.
Right. And if you don't, or if you are having those same struggles and same things that seem like they just keep popping their heads up, that is what this episode is really all about. It's about talking about those unexamined things in your life, and we're going to be giving you some things to think about, and even just like we always like to do is some of the actionable things, which is just as important. And a lot of the actionable things are really tied to you doing some self-inventory.
Yeah. And we always say self-inventory and getting to know yourself. And so what does that really mean? What does that look like? And one of the things I want to kind of start off with saying is that anything that we don't examine, we will regret.
Say that again.
Anything we don't examine, we will regret.
So give me an example, like you were. What made you say that?
If I remember when I was first, I think about, my weight, I think about our budget. I remember we were first trying to learn how to manage our money.
Okay.
And one of the first things they tell you to do, you need to know where you are. So I remember going through, this is back in the day, going through the checkbook and looking at all the names of the stores that I shopped in. And I added up all the places where I was spending money, and I added up all the places where I was just spending. And you saw how much you spent, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was spending so much of our resources on things. And so again, anything you don't examine, if you don't get on the scale, if you don't look at a mirror, if you don't look in the back of your refrigerator, you're going to have some things growing that you might not know about. So if we don't examine, if we don't pay attention to the tension, if we don't pay attention to the things that are going on in our life, they don't just go away.
Right. And you have to really take those steps back to look at your life. And nobody, even your spouse and even somebody who is significant in your life, they can give you indicators, but they really can't force you to take that trip backwards. And sometimes you got to take the trip backwards to actually discover or even understand why you do what you do. Because
most of the time we deal with the symptoms and we don't really ask, well, where did this come from? Where did this start? And, I was talking, that's what we were talking about. It's not that deep. Most of the things that we deal with are really deep because everything has an origin. We talk about the foundation.
Right.
If you don't go back to the foundation of a behavior, one of the things I did today that I hadn't done ever was I watched the movie Precious.
Okay.
And that was a movie.
That's a heavy movie.
It's a very heavy movie. And when it came out, I don't remember how old Erin was, but she said, "Mommy, you can't watch that movie. It's too much."
Right.
And it was so I know it's going to sound weird, but it was so liberating to me for me to be able to watch that movie and it not totally take me back to a place of feeling inadequate. I could empathize and sympathize with her, but the person that used to feel that way, she's gone.
That's liberating.
And so it was a blessing to me. So I think that as we take the long journey inward to why we believe the things about ourselves that we believe, I always ask the question, who hurt you? Who told you that? And how do you make other people feel?
Right.
Those three questions really help us to begin to understand and identify our part in where we are in our lives.
You said that as you looked at that movie, you were being honest with yourself. You're going to have those tragic things that happen in your life and you're going to think about them. But you were honest with, yes, it happened. Mm-hmm. It was real. But I've gotten over it.
Right. And the way you get over it is not by saying it never happened. And no, I was not molested. And no, I didn't have AIDS. And no, I didn't have a child without.
These are all the things that happen in the movie, right?
Yeah. Those are all things that happen in Precious. But I was verbally abused. And I really did have a real deep rooted sense of being invisible and not being valuable and being told I was fat and dumb and stupid. And so those are things that everyone may experience, but two people can experience it and deal with it differently. And
we really want to talk about it, especially as it focuses on the marriage relationship, because just like I mentioned at the very beginning, when you are married or you have a relationship, a significant relationship with someone, there are going to be things that come up. And you have to know, why is this coming up? Right. But also, if you have no idea that where things are coming from, that is going to make you, or should make you, really, really want to say, well, why?
Right.
And if you are afraid to say why, you're going to be stuck there.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes it's easier for us to act as if the person that we're standing in front of at that moment is the origin of our pain, when really, if you keep finding yourself in the same scenario with different people, the only common denominator is you.
Right. And you said something, we were having this conversation, and I was going to save this till later. And the comment came out, and as it pertains to relationships, and you said, and I'm quoting you on this. So, and I want you to elaborate on it, because it literally made me stop in my tracks, and I had to really think about it. And you said, no one should have an expectation for marriage, but you should have hope.
Yes.
And I even put down here, you got to elaborate on that one.
Well, I think a big part of it is there's a difference. And we did a whole episode. Go back and listen to it. It's called Hope versus Expectation.
Right.
I think it's understanding that we should not get married or be in a relationship to get our needs met.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of goes into the unexamined life.
Unexamined life. Because you get married to share your life with someone else that you can serve.
Right.
We get our needs met from God.
Yes.
And so when we don't get our needs met from God, we have this expectation of people, because the Bible says hope deferred makes the heart sick. And so hope is normal. It's a natural part of it. But expectation is demanding someone to do something that they're not capable of doing.
And if you think about that, if you have an expectation for your spouse or someone you're in a relationship with, if you haven't got to the stage of marriage, you're going to be putting a lot of pressure. You're going to be put a lot of expectations, again, on that person to fulfill something that is lacking in your life, or something that has been unresolved in your life, and you're trying to fill that person, or have that person fill that void. And that's going to be the source of a lot of conflict.
Because when you put the weight of your happiness or your identity or your value on another person who needs to be validated, you are going to have a lot of inner turmoil.
It's going to be a long road.
It's going to be a long road. Because, and I remember we talked about that when I really began to realize that God has got to be the source of our identity and our strength and our purpose. And so when we come together as a couple, we are both fragile, broken beings that are becoming one in Christ. We can't become one with the two of us. We can become one in Christ because Romans says, I present myself to you a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, which is my reasonable act of service. We bring ourselves to God, and then God then fills us up. And then our responsibility is to then fill the other person up. And so if I had to describe the difference between an expectation and a hope is something that you look forward to giving. Mm-hmm. An expectation is wanting something without asking for it and expecting the other person to just know what you want.
Right. And even as you think about it, if you're in a marriage relationship and you think that you don't have to change, that is going to be, I'm not saying somebody has an expectation for you to change.
Right.
But that's
just want to change. We should all want to change.
That should be a natural progression in a healthy relationship. You're going to always be changing. We've been together as long as we have, and we're not the same people we were when we first met. Obviously, not just because of an age number and a factor, but also because you've matured in other areas, whether it's your relationship with Christ, your profession, your vocation, or all those things that make you who you are. And that's what we're really talking about. These are the things that make you who you are at your value. And later in the episode, we're going to give you some indicators of things that you can even help you to discover those things, because you say, I've heard you say it before, you got to know who you are.
Yeah.
And that question baffles a lot of people. And I have to be totally honest, early in my life, it baffled me, because what will happen is you will give your resume to someone. You would tell them about your accomplishments. Right. You would tell them about your
occupation,
your achievements. Right. You'll give them, just like you're reading off of a resume. We're going to be talking about relationship resume later on in another episode, but that is something that is a good indicator of maybe you haven't done some self-examination and question. And we're going to give you some of those questions that you can ask yourself as it pertains to understanding who you are.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I love, and I've missed you all, I've missed this time together that Gil and I get to share in the closet, because I really believe that it connects us to God and to each other, and we get to serve each other and all of you, the Rich Relationships community. But it's such an amazing experience to watch someone grow and change, and to see their heart become soft to the idea that, I remember you used to always say, dang girl, you make me feel like I'm broke, like something's wrong with me. And guess what? We are broke and there's something wrong, but it's not my responsibility to point that out to you.
Right. So if you're that spouse and you're constantly, if you can easily identify what's going on with your spouse and you have no problem with pointing it out, can you do the same thing with as yourself? It pertains to yourself?
Yes, because we always talk about that. We're really good at critiquing, and we lack the ability to create. And it's because we get good at what we practice. And I remember asking the Lord, you know, when he says, remove the plank from your own eye, and remove the plank from your own eye, and remove the splinter from your neighbor's eye. And I said, well, Lord, why does that person get to have a splinter? Why do I have a plank? Because we get good at what we practice. And most of us are really, really good at pointing out what's wrong with other people. And we don't really ever take the time to really focus on, what are my growth areas? What are the areas where I need to grow and change? And what are the things that have hurt me? And what are the things that because while it may seem insignificant, when we don't examine those things, they don't just go away.
Right.
They get bigger and bigger. And it makes it harder and harder for people to get close to us, because those things become an obstacle and a barrier to our heart.
And what we're talking about right now at the very beginning of this episode is the truth about an unexamined life.
Right.
Because if you think about those truths, it's where you're at. Right. We talk about it all the time on the episodes about you got to know where you're at from the very beginning.
An assessment.
Yes. And how can you be in a marriage relationship and not think that you're going to need to change?
Well, I think that we don't understand what marriage is.
Or change that old behavior is what I'm talking about. Yeah. You know, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we think that marriage is, again, and I kind of said that, marriage is not where you go to get your needs met. That's what salvation is for.
Right.
Marriage is where we come together to help and encourage and build each other and to serve one another. So if you look at marriage as a place to serve versus a place to be served, I think it makes you more self-aware and it makes you understand that while it is two people becoming one, the only way that can happen is when you surrender. We talked the last time about, we're talking to Tamika and Corey, and she brought up the beautiful word of submission. Mm-hmm. Submission is not just for women, it's for men and women. And I love when Corey said that if I, as a man, can't submit to my wife, to God, how can my wife then submit to me? Right. And so a lot of times if we go into marriage with the old ideas that our parents taught us or the media has taught us or even our experiences have taught us, it's going to only lead to us continuing to practice the wrong things. And so examining things kind of gives you a chance to stop and say, okay, so what's working and what's not working?
And I can even say it's not fun.
No, it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good, but especially when you think about your spouse, this is someone who is the closest person to you, or they should be, who know you better than most people's parents or even their siblings, because they have spent just like being in COVID, a whole lot of time with
together.
You. So they are seeing the good, the bad, the ugly. And when they point out something to you, if your normal defensive mechanisms pop up, that's an unexamined life.
Yeah.
Just remember that if you automatically go to the defense to someone who is your partner in life,
right?
Unexamined life.
Yeah.
And that's something that you want to be mindful about. And we're going to give you some more things here in a little bit, but that's something we talk about it all the time. That's a part of doing that self-inventory.
Yeah. And a part of self-inventory is we talk about your decision board. Who are the people that are in your life that have the permission to speak freely? We need that. I think about when we first got married, there are things that you would try to tell me and I wouldn't listen. And I would have to, because I had gotten used to listening to my girlfriends. And most of the time, my girlfriends sometimes just tell us what we want to hear.
Well, sometimes the bros do that too.
Yeah. And so when you finally get into an authentic relationship, because if I lose, you lose. If you win, I win. So if I know that when you come and bring something to me, I realize that my success or failure affects you the most. And I remember when we would tell Aaron that if you lose, we lose. Your friends, if you lose, it doesn't affect them. And so in a marriage relationship, you are a part of each other. And so the success and the failure affects both people. And so we have to give the person that's the closest to us the freedom to speak freely and share what they need from us and what needs to be resolved in us.
Right. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this one point that I'm going to bring up right now. Is something that we just recently became aware of as a source of a lot of people's discontentment, and that's rejection. Yeah. It kind of goes into what you were talking about with the movie that you watched with Precious. That is if you want to know what rejection is, watch that movie and you will see it from the very beginning.
At every level.
And you will know, but how that can hold you hostage in your life and in your relationships. If you feel rejection, go all the way back to your
when you were the first time you felt it.
Yeah. And sometimes it may not be your parents. It may have been a coach or somebody at school. It was probably somebody who had some significance in your life, but they said something and it really stuck.
And it shut you down.
And so what you end up doing is going to that defense. You start protecting yourself. We are hardwired as humans to protect ourselves
and to be drawn to acceptance.
Yeah.
We're designed to want to be where we're accepted. And it's just a matter of understanding that. One of the things I loved about the movie was that it showed how, and this is why most people who come from very tragic backgrounds are very creative. They are really good at either sports or writing or art, or because they have to create an escape.
Because they came through some serious adversity.
Yes. And so when I talk about, I remember one of the poems I wrote is Matters of the Heart. The way you respond to things is up to you. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to them. And that's a choice. And so it's just a matter of you realizing that, hey, well, why? Why did this happen?
And that's a good way to do it, is just ask yourself, well, why do I do what I do?
Why did this happen? Why does this person do that? Because one of the biggest enemies to us really growing and changing and becoming healthy is if our first reaction to a situation is to blame. Mm-hmm. That is an enemy to growth.
Right. Unexamined life.
Because,
go ahead.
Yeah, we talk about the blame thrower. If your normal tool in a situation is to blame someone else.
Or blame,
or to blame your situation, or to blame your parents.
Always the victim.
You won't grow like that. You have to, instead of blaming, you have to examine yourself.
Right. And so this is what we're talking about on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. We're talking about living an unexamined life, and we're giving you some of the truths at the very beginning. But we want to take a minute here right now, honestly, to just thank everybody, because during this COVID time, we've had the opportunity to interview some amazing couples and individuals and people. But I think it's a part of it is everybody's available. And
that's what's beautiful is that, how when the Bible says he turns ashes into beauty, I believe that as a result of this experience, I call it this time out with God, it's going to either make the best in you come out or the worst.
So we want to thank everybody again. Did you want to talk about the other project that we're working on right now?
Yes.
Well, you mentioned their name in this episode already, so I'll say Corey and Tamika. We interviewed them earlier this last week, I think it was. Yes. And they're a part of the book collaboration.
Yes, the book anthology.
So go ahead, you can give a little snippet about that.
Yeah, and we've been trying to keep it on the wrap. So we want to build some anticipation, let you guys know what is coming. So what's next? Our next step in the Rich Relationship Podcast is the book.
For the community.
Yep. For the community, because we realize as we work with couples and talk to couples, people need more than just a voice on a mic. They need a hand to walk alongside them.
And it is amazing how God has put some amazing people across our path. Some people we did not even know, but once you started asking and soliciting people, would they be interested? They just start coming from all over the country.
And it's so beautiful.
And so it's an awesome team of 16 couples or 17 couples that you're going to be reading some awesome information from them.
Yeah, their stories and their wisdom. And we're trying to build a team so that when you need someone to walk alongside you, that's available.
Yes.
So we're so excited about the amazing power couples that are part of the Rich Relationships Anthology. So you guys be looking for that. We'll start posting things soon, but you guys get ready and get prepared to support us by buying your copy of the Rich Relationships book.
So it's going to be awesome. Gil and Renee Beaver's over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships. Now let's go into our show.
So we're actually talking about the unexamined life on this episode. We're actually at episode 49.
Are we?
Yes, we have 49. We didn't say that at the very beginning, but this is amazing. Episode 49.
Episode 49.
So we were talking about some of the truths, but now we're going to kind of dive into some of the challenges that actually it is. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but there are some things that you need to be aware of when it comes to indicators of when you're not living an unexamined life, but there are things in your life that needs a further examination.
Right.
I would like to say it that way. And one of them, these are just some indicators. Guys, I always got
engine light.
Yes, and I got some lists. So this is a part about knowing yourself. And one of the first points I wanted to make is you will be in constant conflict and always be under stress.
Mm-hmm. And when you're under stress, men and women, that releases cortisol, which is the reason why some people are struggling with their weight. Because stress releases cortisol, which affects your weight.
Right. And a part of this, you think about it, if you find that you're kind of always reacting to your feelings or just flying off the handle
Galatians
for something
5.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And I think a part of it, being short-tempered and in constant battle, always in conflict. If you think of Galatians 5 talks about basically the lust of the flesh and the lust of the spirit.
Old nature and new nature.
And so if you're always finding yourself walking in that old nature, please read Galatians 5. you will get to see. That's a good way to kind of indicate, am I walking in the Spirit, which means I'm examining my life and I'm letting God help me to be transformed, or am I walking in the flesh, which means I am not examining myself and I have out my blame thrower.
Right, because everything seems to set you off. Mm-hmm. If that's something, especially us fellas, one of the emotions that we have down pat is our anger. You know, we taught it, or I won't say taught it, we learned it or displayed it at an early age, and sometimes that can go unexamined again.
Right.
Why is something setting you off so easily?
Right.
So that's the first one. The second one is if you tend to make decisions that are only best for you. You don't even think things through, and it's not so much about being selfish as much as it is about, again, it goes back to trying to fill that need.
Self-serving.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And a part of it is that when you think about, we talk about our appetites. In Genesis, Eve didn't eat the apple because she was hungry. Mm. Eve ate the apple because she saw that it was good and she thought it was going to do something for her.
And she was told a lie.
Yes. And so we have to be careful that we're not allowing our appetites to be the driving force in our life, because our appetites will always lead us off course, because our appetites are self-serving. Again, the key, the goal, the mission of this life and is as humans is to serve God and others and ourselves last.
Right, because you're going to find that when you make those decisions, ask yourself this one question: is it the best one for me?
Mm-hmm. And will I regret it later?
And not what I want, but is it the best for me? We learned it early and we practice it all the time. What is the wise thing to do in this situation? Sometimes wise doesn't always mean enjoyable. It doesn't always mean fun. Yeah. Sometimes it's going to be connected to sacrifice too. So you have to ask yourself.
And delaying gratification, learning how to wait.
And if you're struggling with patience, unexamined life.
Yeah.
And then the third one is you have a low tolerance for other people. That kind of goes into when you, not just your spouse or people that come across your life, do you just tend to be rage. Well, you always mention, you can mention that one, road rage, but do you always seem to be tense with everyone you come in contact with, even a stranger?
Yes.
That is something, unexamined life.
Yes.
You seem to be angry or frustrated for no specific reason. This is something that I had to own, because when we first got married, I used to wake up mad. How do you wake up mad, y'all?
And the thing about that, we were young, and I think when I remember thinking, well, if you woke up mad, you probably went to sleep mad, and you might want to figure out what you're mad about.
Unexamined life.
Yes.
And that is when it comes back to, because I didn't know myself. I didn't know, what is that? Why am I mad? And when you ask that question, if I can't tell you and I get frustrated, unexamined life.
Yes.
No empathy towards others.
Yeah.
Empathy is not just feeling sorry. People tend to sometimes get that one confused.
Sympathy and empathy. Empathy is your pain in my heart. And sympathy is, I'm going to sit alongside you and support you. There's a difference.
Oh, it's a huge difference, because we are called as human beings. You should feel something when somebody is suffering or going through. If you look at it and you just, one of those responses of, sucks to be them, or I'm glad it's not me, or those are indicators
that you have a low emotional IQ as well,
and an unexamined life. So those are some of the just indicators that we wanted to just kind of share with you, and some of the things that we wanted to talk to you about. And again, we didn't say it at the interlude here in this message, that if you do want to reach out to us, you can always go to the Rich Relationships website. Yeah,
and we also have an app, and I didn't understand why we had the Speak Freely app, but during this pandemic, I understand why. You guys can download the Speak Freely app. It's an anonymous platform where you can ask questions, share wisdom, and make decisions, and it's anonymous. Please use it. Please benefit from having a support system, because you don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to be alone. If you don't break the silence, it just might break you.
That's unfortunate. It would be unfortunate. So we're always looking out.
So we're here for you.
And that's important, because you have to reach out. God will place people across your path that will help you not only help you to undiscover or help you with the unexamined life. But just because they come across your path, nobody meets anybody by happenstance.
No.
There's a reason.
And even with the things that are going on with the corona, it has helped us to realize there's a lot of things that we don't have to have. It's made us do a lot of, I was talking to Jackie, even when it comes to your grocery shopping has changed. A lot of the things that you have, if you've gone without it for 2 months, you might not need it.
Right.
And so sometimes what makes us examine our life is when things are on pause. A lot of times what makes us examine our lives are extremes, either something extremely good or something extremely bad. But it's just that we have to get into the practice of realizing that if we don't examine our lives, the people around us will bring things to our attention. And I just believe that if you don't, God wants you to move from inside information, not outside influences. Because if you move from inside revelation, when somebody comes and tells you something, that means that I believe that if God has told you on the inside and you've ignored it and God sends someone else to correct you, more than likely it's going to escalate. And so it's important that when God pricks us and shows us, hey, that's something you might want to spend some time with and just be still. And that's why our quiet time with God every day is important, because when we go to him and spend time with him, he's going to show us things about ourselves that we don't like. And more than likely, your spouse or the people close to you are going to only tell you something that you already know.
Right. And you have to be willing to listen.
Yes.
Because if you don't listen to the people who God has put in your life and you don't listen to the spirit that's already on the inside of you, you're going to have a problem.
Yes.
So we talked about some of the truths. We talked about some of the challenges. But what can we give and help people to understand the actionable things? We got something.
Yes.
So if you think about it, if you want to understand, it starts with really identifying, asking yourself these questions. What are my values?
Yes.
Why are our values so important to understanding who you are?
Because a big part of your values, that's the core of who you are. That's your foundation. Mm-hmm. What are your interests?
That's number 2. Go ahead. Keep going.
Your interests are just the things that you like, the things that you enjoy doing. And the more you think about your values and your interests and the things you're passionate about, those are the ways that you can really kind of define who you should be in close relationship with. Who are the people who should have the ability to speak into your life are going to be those people that you share the same values and the same interests with.
And some of them you're going to be brought together by the interests. Yes. It may be a hobby or something like that your
or
paths...
a book project.
Or a book project that your paths cross together. But then that value has to align.
Yeah.
Because once that values, or when you know what your values are, just like you mentioned already, you won't be influenced by outside influences.
Exactly.
Because you're going to have a gauge to know, well, why am I making this decision? You examine it and compare it to what you already know to be true and to your core.
Right.
Then you won't have to worry about, am I doing something unexamined?
Right.
So that one's the first 2. You said interests and you said values, which are those 2. Now, this is something that I think is important, is for you to actually understand and know what your disposition is.
Oh, yes.
And when I say your disposition, are you an introvert?
Temperament, yes.
Or are you an extrovert?
Yes.
And because the reason why I say that's important, because irregardless, I shouldn't say irregardless because Renee may edit that out. I am a natural introvert.
Yes.
You may not know that because we're doing a podcast and I'm just kind of running off and talking.
There's something funny about introverts when you give them a microphone. It's something about introverts that when you give them a microphone, they just make up for all the words they didn't get to use before. Because it's happened on every single episode.
All my introverts people, I got your back.
Yeah.
We got the mic. But that's okay. But it's just not that we have the mic. We only want to talk about things that matter.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yes, that's what it is.
Okay.
So, but the point that I was getting at is about being an introvert. The reason why that is important when you talk about who you are as a person is when you have that significant person in your life, and it goes back to the actionable things we talked about already, but they won't try to change that about you.
Or they won't be able to, because when you love you and you know who you are, you own it to the point that there is no room for someone to try to change it.
Yeah, and it also helps you to actually accept not only yourself, but I can accept you for who you are. Mm-hmm. And especially as a married couple, I can, and I think this is something that God has really blessed us with over this past couple of years, is that we have really, really learned to adapt to each other's strengths and allow you to operate, leverage. That's probably a better way.
Yes. And rather than competing, we are complementing one another.
Leveraging, yeah.
Yes, we're saying, you know what, that's your thing, that's not my thing. And that's what I think, that when you decide to know who you are and love you, it makes it so much easier for you to love other people. Because I used to always tell the girls when they were little, people will treat you the way they feel about themselves. And when we're having a hard time, and especially those of us who profess to be Christians, how can we love a God that we can't see, and we say we love him, but we hate everything that he loves? Yeah. That's another area of our lives that we need to examine. What's our love tank like? How do we love people? How do we make people feel? That is another indicator of where we are in our own selves, being comfortable in our own skin.
And this kind of piggybacks off of that, is to know your strengths. You know, a part of you actually coming to getting past the unexamined life is when you know not only who you are, this is a part of discovering who you are, but when you know your strengths. Yeah.
And accepting who you are.
Right.
I think it's so important that you learn who you are, and you accept who you are, and you also accept who you are not.
Right. And this is where your spouse or significant other can be very instrumental in this area, especially if you have trouble identifying what are my strengths.
Yeah.
You know, I've asked you that before several times throughout the years. You know, what do you think I'm good at? You know, you can be on that road of knowing who you are and have.
I'm on your decision board.
Yes.
And I'm your cheerleader.
I was thinking, I thought you were going to say chairman of the board, but.
No, I'm your cheerleader.
Yes. And you are. And I appreciate that. But when you help someone to identify what their strengths are, that is so crucial to helping you understand and discover who you are. Yeah. That can be very powerful, because then you won't waste a lot of time doing a lot of unnecessary things, trying to figure it out on your own.
And even if you do a lot of unnecessary things, God doesn't waste anything. He uses it all. Yes. Nothing is wasted.
And you just mentioned that God uses everything. And the last part that I will give, the last note, is your life's mission.
Yeah.
What are you passionate about? What it really, really makes you say, I want to get involved with that. I want to do that. It starts out with just asking yourself those questions. So when you understand and I have identified your life's mission, it kind of goes in, and you think about it, it goes into your interests. It aligns with your values. God is going to surround you about those people. It's going to align with your disposition.
And it is nothing more fulfilling than living your life with your identity, your purpose, and your mission.
Wow.
All aligned.
Yeah, because then it's effortless.
Yeah.
It makes you really smile at what you're doing, just like we sitting in a closet, y'all. We in a closet and we smiling because we actually get to talk about this stuff to people.
We love it.
Because we've been getting feedback. The downloads and the links are growing. We've seen the numbers rise. And sometimes when you think you're doing...
Our numbers for our podcast, not Corona.
Yeah, really. So when you think you're doing something, and a lot of times you may not even realize the mission that you're doing is making a difference. Yeah. You can't let that discourage you.
And a part of it is, and this is one of the things that I have really resolved in this past 5 years, is that success is not results. Success is obedience. So if the numbers never changed, because we love this so much, I will continue to do it until Jesus comes. But it's nice from the human side to see the numbers change.
Because and that kind of goes into what are the results of understanding and knowing who you are and have gotten over the unexamined life, is you're going to have peace.
Yeah.
That's probably the most important
thing. And fulfillment.
Yeah, peace, fulfillment. And you can probably go through this. And the reason why I said peace is because this is that lack of turmoil that you experienced in the latter part of this discussion.
Right.
The peace is going to come over and it's going to rain on the inside of you, and you're going to have that. You may not even know why you have it.
The peace of God that surpasses all understanding. And it really does. It baffles your mind. It's like, in the midst of everything that's going on, how can we have such a sense of purpose? It's because we're living out God's mission for our life, and we know who we are, and it makes a big difference. So when you know who you are, you can discover God's purpose, and you can walk in that mission that he has created you for.
Absolutely. And then one of the outputs of knowing that is you're going to make better decisions.
Yes.
On
less regret.
Living life with less regret. And you're going to tend to not focus on symptoms.
And you also will not spend your time, you'll be examining yourself and not critiquing others.
Right. And that goes back to what that kind of lines with what I was just saying, going into you won't focus on symptoms of other people.
Right.
And want to tell them about themselves.
Because the thing is that we should be looking for the growth areas in ourselves and the strengths in others.
Right. And then the flip side of this, and you mentioned it already, we talked about it. Now you're going to have empathy for other people.
Yeah.
And I think even more importantly is forgiveness.
Yes. And grace.
Yep. Because when you think about that, if you have these internal struggles and you're married or you're in a relationship with someone and you just have never been able to identify what that problem is, and now you have made, like you said, peace with yourself, you have come to understand I'm not the unexamined life anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to have forgiveness for people. And sometimes it's going to be the people that wronged you. Doesn't mean reconciliation.
Right.
But it just means that you're going to have forgiveness for them because they are living an unexamined life.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you guys, when you see this and when you start practicing it, it's going to stand out like a beacon.
Yeah. And it makes your life so much less stressful. And you give people the freedom to be who they are. Even if that's somebody that you don't share the same values and you don't share the same, you can love them. And sometimes I don't think we don't realize walking in love sometimes means walking away.
Wow.
And not being mad.
And you are at peace with it.
Yes, you have peace with it.
So those are going to be all those things that when you think about it, it's going to give you the peace and you're going to have that forgiveness, which is more importantly, as we coming up on the end of this episode, we're thankful and we're grateful that we actually got to do an episode, and we love talking to people, but I love talking to you more.
I love talking to you more too.
So do you want to end up with something? You want to close us out?
Well, I want to talk about the enoughness of God.
Okay.
Because what that really means is that, you hear you're enough. But why are you enough? You're enough because you are fearfully and wonderfully made. And the enoughness of God means you are enough. You know when you've had enough, which means you're not constantly trying to get more and more and more, consuming. And you also know how to say, I've had enough, which means you don't accept negative, destructive behavior or responses from people. You know how to say, no, thank you. I won't accept that. That's not true of me. I won't accept that. I won't own that. And so it's just a matter of those three parts together, not just one, but all three. It is the enoughness of God. We are enough in Him. His purpose, His plan is going to not only fill our hearts and our lives, it's going to fill the hearts and lives of everybody that we come in contact with. Makes us like a breath of fresh air.
So the enoughness is enough.
Enough.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.